Today, we're continuing our Outback adventure, and we're going into some really isolated country. We're so excited! We're going to be travelling on Outback dirt roads that can quickly become impassable. There are hundreds of kilometres between towns and no phone reception. On our way, we come across deadly redback spiders and flooded roads that cause 300-kilometre detours. It's all worth it because we find the most special place to camp rough under the stars, forage for food, and spend our days cooking on an open fire. We called ahead to find out if the road was passable, and we got the all clear. The roads are pretty rough, and we've been driving for hours with no phone reception. Hours later, we have arrived in the tiny town of Menindee, on Barkindi country, with a population of 551 people, and no towns or paved roads for hours in any direction. We followed the signs to a campground, but got there and it was completely closed. So now we are following more signs down a corrugated sand road, and we don't know how long it will be until we find somewhere to camp. Lake Menindee. The lakes fill with floods and then drain again, leaving it dry for periods. It's such a beautiful landscape and so different from home. It feels so surreal to stand in a dry lake, and I feel like I'm a melting clock in a Dali painting. Off we go again, and we find a campsite, right on the edge of the Barker or Darling River. It's so incredible, and there are massive river red gums and so many birds. Mum's collecting wood so we can light a fire and cook dinner. A pelican swimming past. Pelicans are so cool. They live anywhere that there's water, the ocean, or in the centre of Australia. And they have no particular schedule, but simply follow fish. They can stay in a remote inland lake for years until it dries up, and then they decide to fly to the coast. Sometimes they just get blown away with the wind somewhere, and have turned up as far as New Guinea or Indonesia. We're just going to put our swags out on the ground and sleep under the stars tonight. Mum's making her special camping potato bake, and everything tastes so much better when it's cooked on coals. We collected this salt bush and it's perfect for the dish. It's a native plant and regenerates land by sucking salt from the soil and desalinating.
Southbound 90, past the locked up luxury store. Tourists take photographs, you're not a tourist here no more. They're taxing the adobe now that the money moved into town. Chasing a legend. Legend is breaking grounds. Helpless, helpless, helpless. We all sing along. There is a braid that binds us in this threading gone. Heard a sound so heavenly, with the angels singing just for us. Or is that what the wind out here dies on tin? I heard God, I heard God, I heard God. I heard God. Nothing will get you like seeing a cowboy cry. Nothing will get you like seeing a cowboy cry.
Sleeping under the stars is so extraordinary. In the night, we watch shooting stars and listen to owls and birds. Kookaburras wake us to tell us that morning has arrived.
I heard God.
For breakfast, Julia is making Australian damper. This is an Australian camping classic that everyone cooks around a campfire. We've recently learnt that it actually derives from a recipe used by early colonisers. Colonisers never recognised that Indigenous people have such developed agricultural systems, but Bruce Pascoe, in his book Dark Emu, explains that Indigenous Australians grew grain and other crops extensively throughout Australia. And Indigenous Australians were actually the world's first bakers. 36,000-year-old grindstones were discovered not far from here, used to turn seeds into flours for baking. There are such complex histories surrounding most Australian traditions, even cooking damper that we have done on camping trips since we were kids. As regenerative farmers, we're trying our best to learn and question and acknowledge all of these traditions and histories. Julia is making the damper from almond and buckwheat flour and adding currants and walnuts. It's so good. Lunchtime! When we camp, we spend our days chatting around the fire, drawing in the landscape, or cooking delicious meals. It gets so dark here, and the darkness is so full. It's truly amazing. From the leftover potatoes, we're making an omelette with saltbush. Julia also foraged some warrigal spinach in the campground. This is a native spinach that grows throughout Australia. We were so excited to find some growing here in the wild. We have it growing back home in our garden. Yum! Today we're off again, and the roads are open. We called into a service station to ask about the roads ahead, and they suggested taking the alternative route on the other side of the river. The road we were going to take is actually flooded. It isn't raining here, but there have been floods in Queensland, so the water is slowly coming down the river and flooding roads. It's still a few hours' drive until the next town. As we are driving, we come across a flock of red-tailed black cockatoos. They are standing like silhouettes on the road and look almost human. Back home, we are always visited by the yellow-tailed black cockatoos, the most beautiful big birds that glide so gracefully, sing and screech out, and tell us that rain is coming. We've recently learned that there is actually truth behind this. Apparently the grubs that they like to eat by digging out the bark of the trees is easier to access before the rain, when the bark softens. We've never seen red-tailed black cockatoos before, and we are so moved by their presence. They seem smaller than the yellow-tailed black cockatoos that we know, but are so glossy and shiny and black against the red landscape. We're so excited that we jump out of the ute and watch them for ages, and they watch us right back, before flying off into the distance. The red-tailed black cockatoo population is decreasing because of a loss of habitat. So much of the forest that they rely on for food and shelter has been cleared because of unsustainable agriculture. The landscape is so beautiful and empty. We get excited when we see a cow or anything new. Almost 5 hours later, we come into a town with phone reception, bitumen road, and showers. We've been camping in the bush for quite a while, so service station showers have never been so appealing. I'm finally under some hot water, and I look up to see this huge redback spider blocking the door. These deadly spiders' venom acts directly on nerves and have symptoms of severe pain, muscular weakness, and nausea. There is an anti-venom now, but we are so far from any hospital. It's kind of coming towards me, but I decide that if I watch really carefully, I can stay safe and continue showering. But as I'm getting changed, I lean back into another nest with so many more spiders. We counted all up 5 redback spiders with hundreds of babies. After, we tried to report it to the service station worker, and she just replied in the heaviest Australian accent, Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them in there. Alright, time to get out of here and find a new camp. Our next stop is Barorina Fish Traps, the oldest human-made structure in the world. But as we begin driving, we come across road closures because the floodwater has arrived. Now we have to decide whether to go back down, trying to avoid the floodwaters, and going through the mouse plague, or going way up into Queensland and then back down. We're excited to see Outback Queensland, and we don't really feel like navigating through thousands of mice, so we decide to go north.
Southbound 90, past the locked up luxury store. Tourists take photographs, you're not a tourist here no more. The tax and the adobe now that the money moved into town. Chasing a legend. One less legend is breaking grounds.
We arrive in a town on the border as the sun sets. Across the road from the campground, Julia spots a sheep. I miss our sheep at home, so I'm going for a walk, investigating more. There are actually 2 sheep, and they're in the front yard. Also, the gate is open and they can roam the streets and then just come back home.
Heard a sound so heavenly, where the angels.
On my way back to the campground, 2 doors down, I spot a goat in the backyard. This has got to be the best street in Australia. Hey! Goodbye. Hey! Come for pets! No. Oh, sorry, bye! The next day, we drive on and there are hills.
Nothing will get you like seeing a cowboy cry. Nothing will get you like.
It starts to feel so much more like home, and although we are already starting to miss the serene desert landscapes, we have begun to get excited to get home and see old animals. We camp on a beautiful lake in the mountains, and watch more pelicans just float by.
I heard God. I heard God. I heard God.
The next day, driving home, everything feels so familiar. The tones of green, the shadowed cliff faces, and the vines and dense, bright foliage that spills over the roads and grows everywhere. The smell of the rainforest feels like home, but what an enriching journey it has been. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more. And a special thanks to our patrons. We've come back to the farm so inspired and excited to create.